Englishmen drive on the wrong side of the street. It's just as good as the right side. Make a slave of yourself to poetry. English pronoun I's, always capitalized, no matter where in a sentence it is. Microbiologist, Japanese, said, go east. In Germany, ich's never capitalized, except when it begins a sentence. In Russia, you can use I or let it go, as you choose. In the Far East, he made a gesture upward with his hands. Word for I has disappeared. Government is a tree. Its fruit are people. Essay on civil disobedience. As people ripen, they drop away from the tree. Thoreau. On the boat coming over, Tibetan monk learned to speak English very fluently. What he did, he said, was to take his mind and place it at the point where in mind the English language is. Sadie Stahl, born Sadie O'Brien, left her money to the church. When Philip died, bequeathed her 50,000. Finer man there never was. Sadie made certain investments. 50 became 200. Complained bank was taking all her money. Mr. Cunningham said, Sadie, walk across the street. They'll give you all you want. Oh, they will, said Sadie with a twinkle in her eye. What American industry decided about Puerto Rico was that Puerto Rico would be one of its consumers. Puerto Rico shouldn't import anything from any other country. The function of the governments, American and Puerto Rican, is to see to it that what industry wants is what happens. As a New York senior citizen, I get public transportation half price, except during rush hours. I can also go to movies half price if I do so in the afternoons. If I take the subway, I must buy 2 trips at once in opposite directions, round trip. With the bus, I am free to go wherever I wish. Western medicine continues based on error. Notion that first of all, pain must be relieved. That secondly, erasure shall be made of whatever unusual symptoms had arisen. That's what it is, a network of poisonous painkillers and deadly antibiotics. American doctors are steadfastly suspicious of unorthodox therapies that take the whole body into consideration, that begin with spine or with diet. One of the first things to be done, while there's still some energy, is to bring public signs up to date. Signs using language should be designed so that they can be understood by children who don't understand that language. Watergate took America 200 years to produce its own form of theater. Compare The Persians by Aeschylus. No drama. Boredom, fascination. Only time I wrote any music was between 12 and 2, when the senators went out for lunch. People in the audience losing their minds. Dogs searching for bombs. Precedents. An American Family. The Warhol movies. happenings in general. If while reading the menu you have the feeling that you've read it before, best thing to do is not to order anything. He told his class to read the Bible, and so he opened it himself. After reading a little, he laughed, closed the book, and said, "There's just no sense in reading it anymore." Doctor told me, "At your age, anything can happen." Got rid of arthritis by following macrobiotic diet. Work's now taking on the aspect of play. The older I get, the more things I find myself interested in doing. Spreading myself thin. Schoenberg stood in front of the class. He asked those who intended to become professional musicians to raise their hands. I didn't put mine up. Now, when we really need them, they telephoned while we were away to say they weren't coming. Carla had a doctor's appointment for 9 o'clock in the morning. She was prompt. She waited 3 hours. At noon, doctor left for lunch. Carla went home. A few days later, she received a bill for the time she'd spent in the waiting room. 3 teens kill 4. No motive. Shoes and clothes made in Puerto Rico are exported to United States. What isn't sold there goes up in price and then goes back to Puerto Rico. There are only 2 languages. One uses images and ideograms. The other uses an alphabet. In Brussels or Montreal, signs in one alphabetic language are duplicated in another. All over the world, alphabetic signs should be accompanied by their equivalent in characters. We would learn Chinese just by keeping our eyes open. Once Suzuki said, "There seems to be a tendency toward the good." His remark stays in my mind like a melody. What could he have meant? Heavy bread without yeast. Didn't learn how to make it until I was 64. The monks take turns. One of them reads out loud while the others are eating. They call it the greater silence. Americans, their government coupled with their industry, automatically barge in wherever there's this sign of cheap labor. We're all over Latin America. We don't speak Spanish or Portuguese. Our exploitees don't speak English. Now they speak with bombs, hoping someday we'll understand. German pharmacist said if aspirin, instead of having been discovered long ago, had been discovered just recently, it wouldn't be possible to market it. Aspirin would not pass the present restrictions against drugs. Edward Weston told me photographers photograph themselves no matter what their cameras are focused on. Using chance operations, Robert Mahans found a way to let each photograph itself. Traffic was obstructed by a medium-sized car that was standing in the middle of the street. It was empty except for a large, gentle dog who was sitting in the driver's seat. Emily Bueno said, "The reason nothing will happen in America to improve matters is most of the people are comfortable the way it is." We had been talking about China and revolution. The United States has turned Puerto Rico into a kind of Los Angeles, a place where there is no public transportation to speak of, nothing but private cars in greater and greater congestion. Fumes, accidents. He told me he had waited 3.5 hours for a bus. Received letter from journalist. Put your philosophy in a nutshell. Replied, get out of whatever cage you find yourself in. Asked to supply catchy title for conversations with Danielle Charles. Suggested For the Birds. TV interview. If you were asked to describe yourself in 3 words, what'd you say? An open cage. Satie was right. Experience is a form of paralysis. Nobody voted. Government was embarrassed out of existence. Dialogue. New York's the largest Puerto Rican city in the world. Revision of the Golden Rule. Do unto others as they would be done by. After Dad died, I was filling out blanks to increase Mother's Social Security. Mother noticed what I was doing. There's something I've never told you. I know. Aunt Marge said you were married before you married Dad. That's not all. I was married twice before that. What was your first husband's name? You know, I've tried and tried, but I simply can't remember. Aunt Sadie, she was very elderly. She had to be put in a home. They put her in a Catholic one. First thing Sister said was, "Now, Mrs. Stahl, we're going to give you a nice hot bath." Aunt Sadie brightened up. "Oh," she said, "haven't had one of those in a long time." Replied, he was a politician. I laughed. In one ear, he wore an earring. He continued, "Politics is all of the actions of all of the people." The sun shines very dependably in Puerto Rico, but no steps are taken to make use of solar energy. Kudzu, introduced from Japan to control soil erosion, has overgrown American Southeast. Tubers and leaves are edible. Leaves are full of protein. Surrounded by kudzu, Southerners never dream of eating it. Became millionaire in Japan. Dehydrated kudzu leaves. Marketed nutritious powder. Aunt Sadie had the women's club to lunch. The same day she invited the Cunninghams to dinner. Merce, his 2 brothers, and his mother and father. When the food was served, Mr. Cunningham said, "I've never seen a chicken before with so many necks." What is the sound that's heard when a conch shell is held to an ear? Does it originate in the shell, or is it outside sound that went all the way in and came back out, transformed? Not only is the future of music playing new experimental works in Africa and Third World generally, future of art lies displayed before us everywhere. The junk with which we litter both our streets and all the places in nature beautiful enough to attract us. Arriving at University of Puerto Rico, we're told 5-month military occupation of university had just stopped. Teachers had lectured just to collect their salaries. No students had listened. Chancellor gave reception for us. Student and faculty friends we'd made didn't attend. Chancellor didn't either. We're told Chancellor's afraid to appear anywhere. There's your Aunt Sadie, walking down the street with her 2 fur coats on and her corset over them. She was off to church. "Give her a shot of whiskey," Dad said. Taxi driver asked whether I'd seen TV coverage of Nixon's visit to China. Said I had. They play the Star-Spangled Banner better in Peking than they do here in the USA. I agreed. What good did it do if we got out of Puerto Rico? People there have forgotten life's like. What first thing is each morning to do? Warning me not to go on foot outside university precincts. Told me she carried a gun just in case. Noticed door to her apartment had 7 locks. To measure the duration of an experience, you must know the velocity of the mind. Ezra Pound. Before going to Japan for a concert tour, David Tudor and I asked for a contract. We received it. Once in Tokyo, we were given another quite different contract. Asked sponsors which contract they'd follow. Sometimes we'll follow one, and sometimes it'll be better to follow the other. Nuclear weaponry's rational adjunct to internationalism. Each nation's married to industry. Industry's polygamous. Each nation's selfish. What's needed's intelligent equation between human needs and world resources. Buckminster Fuller. Read his critical path. Through electronics, Marshall McLuhan, we've extended central nervous system. International world's schizophrenic, split against itself. There's no political remedy for this disease. Power politics was its cause. Holocaust. A political structure interrupted by actions of people outside of it is a political structure that's not up to date. Holocaust. Survivors, if any, may finally come to their senses. I remember Seattle earthquake. Neighborhood where we were living was alarmed. Left the house as others did. In vacant lot for the first time, we met our neighbors. What business have I in the woods if I am thinking of something out of the woods? thorough. Instead of picking or buying many flowers that are all the same, get just one of a kind. Put each in its own bottle. Flower arrangement with space and the possibility of being easily changed. Immobile. The day continues by becoming the night. Our dreams are closely related to our sense perceptions. Deep sleep, then into alpha before getting up. Puerto Rico, a copy of Newsweek costs $3.50. New York Times costs $2.25. March 1982. You probably heard that we had an earthquake. Some people thought a man under the bed. Not your old Aunt Sadie. She knew. Philadelphia. What business have I in the woods if the woods are not in me? Wake me up at 8:30 or 9, whichever one comes first. A way of writing which comes from ideas, is not about them, but which produces them. About to leave the bus, having gone from one town to another, told conductor no one had collected my fare. Asked him how much it was. "It's free," he said. That was a few years ago in Massachusetts, in one of those 3 college towns that are all fairly close together. Now I'll go to sleep. In the morning, ideas will come to me. The church is not a church. After being moved, it either became an antique shop or might have. And then it was moved again and added onto. Church is now a living room. If your head's in the clouds, keep your feet on the ground. If feet are on the ground, keep your head in the clouds. El Salvador. Dreamt I'd composed a piece, all notes of which were to be prepared and eaten. Lemon and oil, salt and pepper, some raw. Finished score on day of performance. I was to perform it. Set out for concert hall. Had difficulty finding my way. Decided to stop and rehearse. As soon as first notes were cooked, dogs and cats came around and ate them all up. Drove to the airport, bumper to bumper. Back home, glued to the TV. Watergate. 96 degrees. City hydrants opened so those who wish may cool off in the streets. Politics. We are present at the same event, but we notice different things. Adverbs, adjectives, syntax focus on perceiver rather than perceived. Thoreau, at 22, wanted to write in such a way that what he experienced could be experienced by the reader as though reader experienced it himself. Puns do this suddenly. Joyce, Basho, Brown. Utility arises where it wasn't expected, even by author. Or as in thorough, lucidity, puns again, Duchamp, lucidity again, Wittgenstein. At any point where a shell bulges, it can be tapped like a drum. At an edge, it may be plucked, just as the spine of a cactus may be plucked. The traffic never stops, night or day. Every now and then a siren, horns, screeching brakes. Extremely interesting, always unpredictable. At first, thought I couldn't sleep through it, then found a way of transposing the sounds into images so that they entered into my dreams without waking me up. A burglar alarm that lasted several hours resembled a Brancusi. The divorce of state and industry. When assigning seats for transoceanic or transcontinental flights, airline representatives will not ask whether we smoke or not, nor whether we wish to sit by the window or on the aisle. They will ask what games we play. Jack Collins told me that his trip to Iceland was long and tedious. The trip back was short and pleasant. He was playing chess. Things that might have been done that haven't yet. Electronic additions to plants and bushes, turning them into instruments for a children's orchestra. The use of photoelectric eyes to scan the principal entrances and exits at Grand Central Station, bringing about pulverization of music. Transformation of chorus and orchestra into a thunderstorm. Flight from Houston, Texas to Charleston, South Carolina took more than 12 hours. Changed planes in Atlanta. Landing in Charleston, surprised to notice mountains. Once in the airport, asked Porter whether airport was newly constructed. Only airport we've ever had. Turned out to be West Virginia. Correction flight, Charleston to Charleston, was paid for by another airline that had nothing to do with mistake. Aunt Sadie wasn't quite in front of the meat market that was in the building she owned. She was trying to see what was going on without being observed. "Look," she said, "they're giving away the nicest bits of meat." Used to smoke at least 3 packs a day. Everything that happened was a signal to light a cigarette. Finally, I divided myself into 2 people. One who knew we'd stopped, the other who didn't. Every time the one who didn't know picked up a cigarette to light it, the other one laughed until he put it down. In Japanese brain, vowels are processed on one side, consonants on the other. Westerners process vowels and consonants on the same side, leaving other without any relation to language. Out of 23 Japanese brains, 4 or 5 work way Western ones do. Trust a few of us use our heads the way Japanese use theirs. Towed away in New York City. Police wouldn't accept $75 check because I didn't own the car. Went to sleep. Dreamt I was caught speeding a week later in California. Cops said they charged $50 for each person in the car. Had 2 friends with me. When I woke up, realized I'd saved $75 just by being asleep. Enjoyed riding 4-wheeled, away from the roads and the signs. In her 90s, Mrs. Dennison's very well, except, she says, I don't have the energy I had when I was in my 70s. People in Puerto Rico who still have jobs don't have them for 5 days a week, just for 4. Naturally, they don't get as much pay as they used to, though their living expenses have skyrocketed. Those who work in hospitals stay at home for half a week. Patients get along by themselves. Staple diet in Brazil's always been rice and beans, black beans. American advisors said soybeans would make more money. For a while that happened. Then price paid for soybeans in Chicago slumped. Brazilians now standing in line to buy black beans imported at outlandish prices. Mushroom is close. Pine tree continues hiding it with its needles. Out of unemployment comes self-employment. There's no longer time to correct things first here and then there, say in Puerto Rico today, South Africa tomorrow, later in Israel or Salvador. Whole thing's wrong. Beginning a future, if there is to be one, is making world a single place, freeing it from its division into nations. With the innermost part of the shell cut off, shell is trumpet, air in one way, out the other, but nothing's lost. Sound has been gained, leading tone to tone shell gave before being altered. The tonics heard again by closing off cut-off end with a finger, placing shell to ear. Situation has both changed and remained what it was. Breakfast in Dutch hotel, tables piled high with cold bread, cold meats, cheese, cold soft-boiled eggs and butter, plastic utensils, yellow, green, and orange. Guests serve themselves. Waiters are busy pouring coffee and tea, piling up used utensils, and throwing leftover food into large orange plastic garbage containers placed in the center of the dining room. It was a very hot summer day. Merce's mother was looking out the window. "Look, there's Sadie," she said, wearing her rubbers. No wonder her feet hurt. If you partly fill a conch shell with water and then tip the shell this way and that, from time to time you will hear gurglings over which you have virtually no control. Contingency. People ask what the avant-garde is and whether it's finished. It isn't. There will always be one. The avant-garde is flexibility of mind, and it follows like day the night from not falling prey to government and education. Without avant-garde, nothing would get invented. I'm gradually learning how to take care of myself. It has taken a long time. It seems to me that when I die, I'll be in perfect condition. We've turned Puerto Rico into a country without anything. No fishing or agriculture, no industry. Avocados and carrots came from Florida. Factory-centered cities along the southern coast are ghost towns. After 17 years, no taxation. Profiteering companies on 18th closed down, or A went bankrupt. B started up again under new name. Result, unemployment's incomplete, just 40%. Concerned about her electricity bill, Aunt Sadie switched off anything she wasn't actually using. She asked Merce's mother about the refrigerator light. Mrs. Cunningham explained it was automatic, on when the door was open, off when it was closed. Not convinced, Aunt Sadie peeked. She opened the door just the least little bit, found she was right. See, it's on. Optimism is continuous. Only the space in which it operates expands or contracts, sometimes so little that it brushes against the skin. Daniel in the lion's den. One is then at home, no place else to go. The night redoubles our energy, imagination. I am not a good historian. I don't know how many years it's been, but every now and then when I go out, I hesitate at the door, wondering whether a cigarette's still burning somewhere in the house. The large Australian shells are as musical as violins. Doris Dennison's mother's 95. Doris said, "Mother, why do you still treat me like a child? You know I'm 74. You are, said Mrs. Dennison. I can't believe it.